On the fields of Sicily in the summer of 1943, the steel beast Tiger, worth hundreds of thousands of marks, roared, certain that nothing could stop it. But in the blink of an eye, from the corner of a shattered street, an anonymous American soldier raised a rusty steel tube worth barely $25. A sharp whoosh cut through the air, the rocket streaked forward, and the pride of the Panzerwaffe erupted into a burning heap of ashes. Nazi Germany was horrified to realise those cheap steel tubes had turned every American infantry squad into tank hunters. May 1942, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. Across the wide testing field, dotted with mounds of earth and old bomb craters, the early summer wind carried the acrid smell of scorched metal and heavy machine oil. Since morning, a group of generals and senior officers from the Ordnance Department had gathered at the range, ready to witness demonstrations of new anti-tank weapons. On a makeshift wooden grandstand, General Gladion Barnes, the head of research and engineering, sat with his legs crossed, jotting notes while glancing at his pocket watch. Around him were colonels, lieutenant colonels, and military engineers. All were waiting for the heavyweight contenders in today's trial. From mortars to large-caliber anti-tank guns, everything on display was bulky and complicated. Barnes tapped his pencil on his notebook. "All right, let's begin. Show me something that can actually stop a Panzer IV or a Tiger." The gun crews stepped forward one by one. The first mortar, as massive as a medieval cannon, required 4 men just to haul it into place. They set it heavily on a rotating mount, the barrel aimed at a moving M3 Stuart tank running at a distance of 150 yards. Orders rang out, the first round thundered off, smoke and dust billowed thick. But when the haze cleared, the tank was still lumbering along. The shell had landed wide, tearing up the ground several yards off target. A gunner, drenched in sweat, wiped his brow and adjusted the sight. Second shot, third shot, still misses. The shells were so heavy the weapon was nearly impossible to adjust quickly. The generals shook their heads. A colonel muttered, "Good Lord, this thing weighs a ton. How are foot soldiers supposed to drag it onto a battlefield?" Barnes sighed, his expression weary. Meanwhile, at the far end of the range, a thin young man in a wrinkled shirt walked forward carrying a steel tube about 4 feet long. At his side was Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Skinner. Barnes frowned. "Skinner, what the devil is this?" "We don't need a comedy act today," Skinner smiled, forcing a calm tone. "Sir, may I introduce Lieutenant Edward Uhl?" And his weapon Barnes glanced at the tube slung on Uhl's shoulder and gave a scornful laugh. "This? A hollow water pipe." Uhl set it down on the ground, his voice steady. "Yes, just a steel tube. But sir, it fires a rocket, and any private can learn how to use it in a single afternoon." A few officers burst out laughing. Colonel Gladion shook his head. "The Germans are rolling out Tigers with armour 100 millimetres thick, and you bring us a brass horn?" Skinner quickly interjected, "Just give us a chance. 1 shot. That's all." Barnes folded his arms and waved his hand. "Fine. But don't blame me if you make fools of yourselves." Uhl placed the tube on its mount, then pulled from his pocket a bent wire coat hanger twisted into a crude circle. He began attaching it to the front end of the tube. One officer blurted out, "What on earth are you doing?" "Sight," Uhl replied curtly. "We don't have a proper device." "This will do." Barnes raised his eyebrows. "A sight made from a coat hanger? All right then. Let's see what kind of nonsense this thing can pull off." Uhl pulled on a welder's mask, hefted the tube onto his shoulder. His stance looked awkward, almost like a band player about to blow into Bob Burns's comical radio Bazooka horn. A few men chuckled. Uhl stayed silent. Holding his breath, he aimed through the crooked wire ring. Then he squeezed the trigger. Whoosh! A jet of flame burst out the back, a shrill hiss ripping the air. The rocket shot forward in a straight line. Boom! It slammed square into the side of the M3 tank, erupting in a black fireball. The entire proving ground fell silent. An old general whispered, "Almighty God, it hit." Uhl swiftly pulled out a second rocket, loading it in just 5 seconds. Another sharp whoosh rang out. The second round slammed into the exact same spot, rocking the whole tank's hull, thick smoke billowing upward. No one was laughing anymore, every mouth hung open, every eye locked in stunned disbelief. Barnes slowly stepped closer, his eyes blazing. He stared at the steel tube on Uhl's shoulder, then burst out laughing. "Good Lord, it really does look like Bob Burns's Bazooka. Only this time it's playing a death march for German tanks." The officers erupted in chatter, voices buzzing. Colonel Gladian, the one who had mocked it so loudly earlier, was now silent, his face flushed red. Skinner smiled, turning to Barnes. "Sir, this prototype was thrown together in just a few hours from a few simple pieces of scrap metal. If we mass-produce it, each launcher costs only $25. $25? Barnes repeated, incredulous. That's right. $8 per rocket. For $75,000, the price of a single Sherman tank, we could equip 3,000 launchers and 20,000 rockets. Just imagine it, sir. Every infantry squad with the power to kill tanks." Barnes spun toward the smoking tank, stood silent for a long moment. Then his voice rang out, firm and decisive. "Order me 5,000 of them." Immediately, the news spread like wildfire. The General Electric factories, once busy making fans and refrigerators, now received urgent orders. Build rocket launchers as fast as human hands could work. Assembly lines sprang up in only a few weeks. In a New York workshop, a young woman with a red scarf tied over her hair leaned over her welding torch. She grinned at a co-worker as sparks flew. "You know, this thing's light as a feather. Doesn't take 3 hours to put one together. And they say it can knock out a tiger." The heavy-set man next to her shrugged. "Sounds crazy. But hey, if a $25 tube can kill a beast that costs the Germans 250,000 marks, they'll go nuts." Back at Aberdeen, Uhl faced a military reporter's question. "Do you believe this invention will change the course of the war?" Uhl smiled faintly, his gaze distant. "All I know is, with this, a private can stare down a German tank without despair. That alone is a big change," Skinner, sitting beside him, lit a cigarette and nodded. "And the Germans don't have the faintest clue what's about to hit them." That night, Barnes's office lights still burned. He sat before a map of Europe, the red arrows of the Wehrmacht stretching across the continent. In his diary, he wrote, "Today, a worthless steel tube left us all speechless. The Germans will never suspect what's coming their way." A month later, wooden crates marked top secret began leaving the factories, stacked high onto trains bound for the ports. Each crate held several brand new bazookas and dozens of rockets. Uhl travelled with one of those shipments, heading across the Atlantic. In a letter to his wife, he wrote, "My love, I don't know how much more suffering lies ahead, but I believe thousands of boys will come home alive because of this weapon. One day, when you hear people talk about it, remember, it all began in the scrapyard at Aberdeen." June 1942. Washington, D.C., the Pentagon. In a smoke-hazed conference room, fluorescent lights glinted off a long wooden table piled with thick dossiers. General Barnes, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, slammed a report down onto the table. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing, "we've just seen a weapon that can change warfare. It isn't a heavy gun or some complicated piece of technology. It's just a steel tube with a coat hanger sight. But it can destroy tanks." An older officer with salt and pepper hair frowned. "You mean that bazooka? Sounds like a joke." The Germans have Tigers and Panzer IVs, and we hand a man a steel pipe? You must be kidding. Barnes knocked the table. No, I'm not kidding. I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm ordering production of 5,000 launchers. Not next month, not next year. Right now, the debate went on for hours. Many Conservative officers shook their heads, insisting tanks should be fought by tanks, that infantry couldn't stand up to heavy armour. But Barnes was unmoved. He laid out a figure that hushed the room. A German Tiger costs about 250,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $100,000. A Bazooka and 10 rockets cost $110. If this works, we'll gain a tremendous advantage in this war. The room erupted into noisy discussion. Then a younger general, eyes bright, tapped his pen on the table. If that's true, we must make it the weapon of every squad. Barnes nodded. Exactly. Now it's time for American industry to step up. A few days later, at General Electric headquarters in Schenectady, New York, the board received an urgent cable from Washington. Plant manager McKinley read it and broke into a sweat. Good Lord! They want 5,000 launchers in 5 weeks. This isn't fans or refrigerators. This is a weapon a young engineer jumped to his feet. But, sir, it's only a steel tube. We have welding lines and rolled steel. If we mobilize every worker, we can do it. McKinley was silent a moment, then declared, "Then do it." From today, every consumer production line converts to making bazookas. Even the washing machine assembly, the factory floor, changed within days. The clatter of welding and striking metal filled the air. Workers who once assembled fan motors now fitted batteries and firing leads. Young women with red scarves tied in their hair moved at practiced speed, welding seams with steady hands. One woman welded and sang softly, her voice rising above the machines. This steel tube will go to Europe. Maybe it will save my husband. The man beside her snorted. Save him? It's just an empty pipe, she answered, eyes resolute. This empty pipe will make Hitler's steel tigers burn. Just wait and see. In a small office at Aberdeen, Uhl and Skinner got word from GE. They looked at one another and laughed. Good Lord, do you see? Uhl shouted. From a scrap heap tube to thousands. In 6 months, GIs will carry these to the front, Skinner inhaled, exhaled a wisp of smoke. And when that day comes, the Germans will learn what a nightmare American industrial power can make. July 1942. On General Electric's new assembly line, the first bazookas rolled off, still smelling faintly of green paint. The army shipped them by rail to the ports with top-secret labels. An old worker watched the train pull away and whispered, "Maybe my boy at Fort Benning will carry one of those. I just pray he comes back." Meanwhile, at Fort Benning, Georgia, a special training session took place. Lieutenant Instructor Franklin Johnson held up a bazooka before a line of recruits. Look here. In one afternoon, anyone can learn to fire this. No more cowering before German tanks. From now on, we're going to hunt tanks. A blonde recruit grinned, half skeptical. Sir, that water pipe's really supposed to take out a tiger? Johnson gave a curt smile and met his eyes. You'll see. When a rocket hits an armour plate, you'll believe. And when German soldiers see tigers burning because of one infantryman, they'll panic. In Berlin, inside the Reich Armaments Ministry, intelligence reports began to mention a new American weapon. An Abwehr officer briefed the room. The Americans are mass-producing an anti-tank rocket launcher. Reports are fragmentary, but we know it's light, easy to use, and cheap. An armoured general laughed scornfully. Nonsense. German tanks are invincible. No foot soldier can pierce a tiger's armour. A younger officer murmured, but if it performs as these reports say, we will have trouble. Silence fell. They could not yet imagine the storm forming across the ocean. Autumn 1942. At Schenectady, the Bazooka assembly line had reached a production rate of 5,000 launches a month. Boxcars full of weapons left the plant, stretching down the tracks. A war correspondent came by and recorded the words of a female worker. "I've never fired a gun, but I know the welds I make could save a boy's life." "That's enough for me." Barnes returned to Aberdeen and met Oul. He held a thick report in his hands. "You know, Oul, they did it. From a prototype made out of scrap iron, we now have an army of bazookas. There'll be no more GIs running when they hear German treads. They'll stand, raise the launcher, and fight back." Oul smiled, his voice low. "And then the Germans will learn a bitter lesson. The most complicated weapon doesn't always win." On the last night of October, a train loaded with bazookas rolled out of the factory for the New York docks. The sea breeze snapped at the American flag as crates marked top secret were hoisted aboard transport ships bound for the Atlantic. A logistics officer wrote in his journal, "Tomorrow they sail to North Africa." No one knows if they'll work, but I believe. Behind each launcher is American industry and the faith of millions. And so, in just a few months, from a steel tube scavenged in a junkyard and a bent coat hanger, an industrial storm had burst forth. Tens of thousands of bazookas stood ready for the hands of American soldiers. November 8th, 1942. Daylight had not yet broken. A thick mist lay over the Mediterranean off the coast of Algeria. Waves slammed at the landing ships, which listed as they carried hundreds of American troops. In the cramped steel holds, ragged breathing, clanking metal, and soft prayers mixed together. Private Joseph Carter clutched his M1 Garand, his eyes tense. In front of him sat a long wooden crate, its lid sealed with red wax, the bold stenciled words, "Secret, do not open until combat." Carter whispered to his buddy, Sam Walker, "What the hell do they have locked up in there?" "We're heading into hell, and they make us haul a sealed crate." Sam shrugged, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. "I heard it's some kind of new weapon, but damn, why don't they train us with it first?" A corporal barked, his voice cutting through the roar of the sea. "All hands attention! Prepare to go ashore." The ship shuddered as Vichy coastal batteries opened up. Sand and seawater sprayed everywhere. Many GIs clutched their heads. Some began to vomit from seasickness and fear. When the bow struck the sands at Sidi Ferruch, the ramp dropped. Machine gun fire poured down from the heights like rain. Bullets sang close, sand erupted, spattered with blood. "Charge!" the lieutenant commanding shouted, but at the same time he roared, "Open that crate!" Now, Carter and Sam rushed forward and smashed the lid with their rifle butts. The top flew off. Inside were long steel tubes, about 1.3 metres long, roughly 4 feet 3 inches, painted deep army green, and dozens of pointed rockets. "Jesus!" Carter gasped. "What is this thing?" An old sergeant quickly pulled the paperwork tucked inside, scanned it, and barked, "This is a bazooka!" An anti-tank rocket launcher. One man shoulders the tube, another loads the rocket. "Learn it now, or a tank will squash you." The whole unit scrambled. Under the incoming fire, they tore apart the tubes, installed batteries, and hooked up the wiring. Many men wired the polarity wrong and got jolted pale. A private, shaking, asked, "Sergeant, how do you aim this thing?" The sergeant shoved the crooked wire ring onto the front of the tube and said bluntly, "There, aim through that." "Pray it hits," Carter whispered to Sam. "This steel tube's supposed to take out a tiger." "I don't believe it," Sam gritted his teeth. "If you don't believe, then look." In the distance came the grinding rasp of tracks on sand. A Vichy Renault R-35 crept out, its gun pointed straight at the beach. American soldiers panicked, a few started to run. "Carter, shoulder it!" The sergeant yelled. "Sam, load!" Carter hefted the bazooka. The tube felt heavy on his shoulder. Sam fumbled the rocket into the rear. "Aim!" Carter squeezed the trigger. "Whoosh!" The hiss cut the air. The rocket streaked forward but skimmed the tank's flank and detonated behind it. The Renault kept coming. "God damn it!" Carter shouted. Sam was shaking. "Shoot again! Quick!" Carter chambered a second rocket. He took a deep breath and aimed carefully at the tank's flank, just under the turret. Whoosh! Boom! Flame exploded. The Renault shuddered and came to a halt. Thick black smoke rolled up. The hatch flew open and Vichy crewmen jumped out, hands raised. The American squad erupted in wild cheering. Carter panted, eyes wide in amazement. My God, it really knocked out a tank. But the joy was short-lived. On the right flank, a young soldier pulled the trigger and the rocket detonated inside the tube. Flames whipped out the back, tossing him to the ground. He was scorched all over. "The rounds are faulty," somebody shouted. Many rockets had been dampened on the long sea voyage. Some failed to fire. Some detonated prematurely. Cries of terror mixed with mad laughter as a few rockets hit their targets. Sam yelled, "Carter, how many good rockets do we have left?" Carter rifled through the crate, sweat pouring down his face. "Don't know. But we have to fire them all, or we die." That afternoon, the report sent back to headquarters read, Bazooka destroyed at least 2 Vichy tanks. However, the failure rate is high. Urgent improvements required. In the command tent, Eisenhower read the report, his face darkening. He asked, "Were they trained?" The aide shook his head. "No, sir, they weren't." All the crates were sealed. They had to learn under fire. Eisenhower slammed his pen onto the table. "God damn it! We send men to fight with something they've never seen, yet they still burned tanks. Good. But from now on, we don't let this kind of foolishness happen again." That night, Carter and Sam sat in a sandpit, their weapons still warm. Carter muttered, "Sam, I still can't believe it. That steel monster burned because of this tube." Sam nodded, his voice hoarse. "I can't believe it either. But from now on, tanks aren't death incarnate. From now on, we'll go hunting tanks far off. The wreck's flames still burned fitfully in the dark." In his diary, Carter wrote, "Today I felt hope for the first time." The bazooka isn't perfect. Many comrades died because of it. But when the rocket hits, the feeling, it's like punching a hole through fear. Tanks are not invincible anymore. On the other side, a Vichy French officer reported, the Americans used a new weapon, a long light launcher that fires armor-piercing rockets. The effect is inconsistent, but dangerous. If they improve it, tanks' future will be seriously threatened. The news leaked to Berlin. An armoured general read the intelligence report and scoffed. "American soldiers playing with steel tubes? Wait and see, our tigers will crush them." But a younger officer murmured, "Sir, what if they mass-produce tens of thousands? Cheap as they are, what if every squad has one?" The room fell suddenly silent. That night, Eisenhower sat alone in his tent, staring at the map. He lit a cigarette. Smoke curled under the lamp. "Bazooka," he whispered. "It isn't perfect, but it has planted the seed of hope for a hard-fought victory in this long war. Starting tomorrow, our men will no longer run from tanks. They'll stand, heft the tube, and fight back." He pictured the scene, thousands of bazookas across Europe, turning every road and every thicket into a deadly trap for the Panzerwaffe. On its first day in combat, the bazooka was awkward and prone to faults. But that first whoosh at Sidi Ferruch marked the start of a new era, a time when a trembling private could bring down a steel monster worth hundreds of thousands of marks. February 1943, North Africa, the Kasserine Valley. The Sahara sun burned the dunes a fierce gold. The air was thick with gun smoke and dust. The US Second Corps had just been through a nightmare. Rommel's 10th and 21st Panzer divisions struck like a pack of steel wolves, smashing inexperienced American formations. Tracks grated on parched earth, and Maybach engines growled louder than any screams. In a disordered foxhole, Private Carter and Sam, who had manned a bazooka in Algeria, huddled and watched as comrades fled. Shermans lay burned out in twisted heaps. Supply trucks were ablaze. Half-tracks had been abandoned. My God, Carter trembled. German panzers rose up like hell itself. Sam ground his teeth, the bazooka still in his hands. Shut up. We still have this. At least we've got a fighting chance. On the ridge, a Panzer IV crept forward. Around it, American soldiers scattered. Carter reached to shoulder his bazooka, but Sam grabbed his arm. No rockets left. We fired them all in the last fight. Carter bit his lip and cursed. They were forced to withdraw, leaving crates of ammunition and several intact bazookas behind. That afternoon, German scouts swept the battlefield. Lance Corporal Hans Becker, a young Panzer grenadier, shouted with glee, "Oberleutnant, look what we found!" He hauled out a long steel tube, painted green, still fitted with wires and a wooden grip. A few rockets lay scattered nearby. Lieutenant Kurt Vogel stepped forward, took it up, and frowned. "What the hell is this? A musical pipe? Looks like a toy," Hans laughed. "Maybe it's the Americans' new weapon." Kurt handed it to a warrant officer engineer, Feldwebel Meyer. Meyer examined it carefully and said, "No, this isn't a toy, it's a rocket launcher. Very simple. But if it works, it's extremely dangerous." Kurt raised an eyebrow. "You sure? An empty tube can knock out a German tank?" Meyer picked up a rocket and pointed to its conical tip. "Look here. This is a shaped charge. Properly designed, it can penetrate about 80 millimeters of armor at close range. That means our Panzer IVs could be pierced." The air grew heavy. That night, at the field headquarters, Rommel received the report. He held the bazooka in his hands, his eyes bright behind a film of desert dust. Simple, but clever. Rommel tapped the steel tube. A fool of a worker could assemble this, and yet it can threaten vehicles worth tens of thousands of marks. A Panzer general objected, "Field Marshal, the Americans are raw and undisciplined. They can't use this effectively." Rommel gave a thin smile. "Never underestimate American industry. They can produce these by the hundreds of thousands. Then every bush and every street corner will have a bazooka pointed at us." He ordered, "Ship the intact specimens to Berlin immediately. I want the Heereswaffenamt to analyze everything about this weapon within 2 weeks." On February 28, 1943, at the Kummersdorf Proving Ground near Berlin, a team of German engineers gathered around the bazookas shipped back from North Africa. Chief Engineer Müller wrote in his notebook, "Weight 6 kilograms. Extremely simple construction. Manufacture does not require advanced technology. The rocket can penetrate 80 millimeters of armor at 100 meters." Another engineer scratched his head. "We wasted so much effort on the 88 millimeter gun. Bulky, costly, while the Americans only needed this cheap steel tube." Müller shook his head quietly. "This is a bitter lesson, but at least we can copy it, perhaps even improve it." A week later, in the Armaments Ministry meeting room, Speer, the Minister of Armaments, received the report. He slammed his hand on the table. "Make an immediate copy. But replace the American 60 millimeter warhead with an 88 millimeter one. I want it to have double the penetration. We'll call it the Raketenpanzerbuchse General Guderian, who had been invited, frowned. Speer, I agree this is a good idea. But don't forget, mass production requires workers and materials. America has millions of workers. We are being worn down by bombing." Speer replied coldly, "If we do nothing, we die. Our tanks will be burned by that $25 tube. Better to have a few counter-weapons than wait to be incinerated." In a Panzerwaffe camp in Tunisia, the rumour spread fast. Some young men whispered at night, "They say the Americans have a little gun that can knock out a tank." "Is it true?" A corporal scoffed. "Nonsense! Panzers are unbeatable. Only 76s and 88s can stop them." But a veteran who had faced a bazooka at Kasserine sat quietly sharpening his dagger and murmured, "I saw it myself." A Vichy Renault burned out. A single GI with a steel tube did it. "Watch out, lads." Silence fell over the hut. The desert wind sighed like the last breath of steel monsters losing their prestige. In Berlin, a secret report went up to the High Command. Red inked across the top read, "American weapon M1 rocket launcher, Bazooka. Simple, cheap, effective. Serious tactical threat to the Panzer. Recommend urgent production of a copy A. General read it and muttered, 'We used to mock the Americans as being good only at making refrigerators and razors. And now they have turned a steel tube into a war-changing weapon.'" At the front, Carter and Sam survived the debacle at Kasserine. They were pulled back to refit. At a unit briefing, the commanding officer said, "We lost the battle, but don't forget, our bazookas made French and German tanks afraid." The problem is simply that we lack numbers and experience. "Next time, we won't run," Sam leaned toward Carter and whispered, "See? Even in defeat, they're talking about the bazooka. I'm sure of it. This thing will terrorize the Germans yet." In a small Hamburg beer hall, a few Panzer officers on leave traded gossip. "They say in North Africa the Americans have a bazooka horn, funny name, but it burns tanks." Another burst out laughing. "A bazooka horn? So the GIs are playing music while they shoot tanks?" The whole table laughed. But in a dark corner, a young officer did not laugh. He drained his glass and stared fixedly. "What if this isn't a joke? What if every American soldier has one of those deadly horns?" The laughter died away. In September 1943, a German copy of the bazooka officially entered service under the name Panzerschreck. It was larger, heavier, and its 88mm warhead could penetrate 160mm of armour. But its cost rose to 150 Reichsmark, many times the price of the American bazooka. And Germany's workers and raw materials were running out. When the first Panzerschrecks were issued to units, one officer muttered, "We are using an enemy's design." How bitter back at Kasserine, the memory still haunted German soldiers. Lance Corporal Hans Becker later wrote in his diary, "For the first time I saw how such a simple weapon could threaten panzers. We mocked it at first, but when you imagine every American soldier carrying one of those tubes, the Panzerwaffe will no longer be death incarnate." July 1943. Sicily was ablaze. The ground shook under the treads of German tanks. The Tiger One, pride of the Panzerwaffe, was rolling down a dirt road near the village of Biscari. With 100mm of armour and its 88mm gun like a sledgehammer, it made any infantryman tremble just by the roar of its engine. Inside a shattered stone house, a squad of American paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division panted hard, sweat pouring down their faces. Private Carter, now a hardened veteran after North Africa, wiped his hands on his pants, eyes fixed on the hulking shadow drawing nearer. Sam Walker, still his loyal comrade, whispered, "My God, a tiger." "This time we're done for Sergeant Halloway," their leader snapped. "Quiet. We still have the bazooka. This is the chance to prove it in real combat." He looked at Carter and Sam. "You two, bazooka team. Firing position upstairs, second window. Don't fire until I give the order." The Tiger lumbered forward, dust billowing beneath its treads. The Maybach's growl echoed across the valley. Carter hefted the bazooka to his shoulder, heart pounding. Sam, hands shaking, slid a rocket into place. He whispered, "Carter, if we miss, we'll be crushed." Carter clenched his teeth. "There's no way back. If I die, at least fire it yourself." Sam's voice cracked. "Don't say that. We'll both make it out alive." The Tiger halted in the middle of the crossroads, its turret turning slowly. Sunlight flashed off the thick armour, making it look like an indestructible beast. Inside the tank, German Lieutenant Karl Hoffmann, commander of the Tiger, sneered, "Where are the cowardly Yankees now?" "All they know is how to run," a gunner nodded. "One shell from us and that whole building comes down." Karl peered through the periscope, but he had no idea that, at that very moment, from a second-story window, Carter had lined up his sights on the driver's vision slit, one of the rare weak spots. Sergeant Halloway dropped his hand. "Fire!" Whoosh! The rocket streaked across, a trail of flame slicing the air. Boom! It slammed into the vision port, a red flash bursting through. Inside the Tiger, the explosion rocked the crew. The driver screamed, his eyes burned by flying shards. Smoke filled the compartment. Carl shouted, "Damn it! Shut it down! Check the damage!" But before they could react, a second rocket shrieked in. Boom! Flames shot up from the tank's flank. Fuel spilled and ignited. The 56-ton monster shook, then froze. The turret hatch burst open. German crewmen scrambled out in panic, some of them burning. In the ruined house, Carter lowered the bazooka, his hands trembling violently. Sam stared, wide-eyed, unable to believe it. Almighty God, we just torched a Tiger. Sergeant Halloway roared, "See that? Even the steel devils can die. Don't ever forget this moment, boys. This is the first time a Tiger has been killed by infantry." The Americans hugged each other, laughter breaking through tears. On the German side, news spread quickly. The battle log of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division recorded July 11th, 1943. One Tiger I destroyed by enemy infantry weapon. New weapon identified, rocket launcher, serious threat. Karl Hoffmann, after escaping with his life, was interviewed at headquarters. Still shaken, he said, "I once believed the Tiger was invincible. But today, an unknown soldier with a cheap steel tube turned it into a burning wreck. This is the first time I have truly felt fear." That evening, in a makeshift wooden hut, Carter and Sam sat in silence, firelight flickering across their weary faces. Sam gave a faint smile. "Carter, remember Algeria? When you missed that Renault, I thought we were dead. Today was different. Today we did the impossible together," Carter answered slowly. "Yeah, but I don't just feel proud, Sam. I feel chills. A Tiger, worth 100,000 marks, brought down by a $25 tube. The world's gone mad. In the German barracks in Sicily, the mood was grim. A young Panzer officer asked his commander, "Sir, how do we counter this?" "If every American squad has that weapon." The commander growled, "Our Tigers are still strong. We just need to be more careful. From now on, never enter a village without infantry in front." For the first time, the Panzer training manual carried this warning. The enemy possesses infantry weapons capable of destroying tanks. Extreme caution required. News of victory reached Washington. The report read, "Bazooka destroyed a Tiger I in Sicily. Effectiveness beyond expectation. Infantry morale greatly improved." At the Pentagon, General Barnes read the report and smiled. "So Uhl's steel tube with a coat hanger sight has proven its worth. Tigers can be killed." The next day, Carter wrote a letter home to his mother. "I can't give you details, but yesterday I witnessed what the papers are calling a miracle. My buddies and I burned a monster the Germans believed to be immortal. I don't know how long this war will last, but now we have hope. I believe I will make it home alive." Later, in his memoirs, a German officer admitted, "The day a tiger was brought down by a bazooka in Sicily, we understood that the golden age of the Panzerwaffe was over. From then on, every bush, every window could hide death." At a US training base, the news was instantly turned into teaching material. Lieutenant Instructor Franklin Johnson held up a photo of a blackened tiger and told the recruits, "Look here. This is a tiger, Hitler's steel monster. And this, one American soldier with a bazooka burned it to the ground. From today on, never say, 'A tank can't be killed.' With a bazooka, anything is possible." Cheers thundered across the drill field. The fighting in Sicily raged on. But from that day forward, in the minds of American soldiers, the tiger was no longer an immortal spectre, and in the minds of German troops, the bazooka was no longer a joke. It was a nightmare creeping into their dreams. December 1943. The town of Ortona, southern Italy. Narrow cobblestone streets lined with tall, thick-walled houses, their windows black and empty. The once picturesque town had become a deadly maze. Artillery rumbled in the distance, tiles and bricks fell in showers. The sky hung heavy with smoke. In an abandoned house, Carter, Sam, and their American squad hunkered down. They were long accustomed to the bazooka since North Africa, and now the weapon had become their only salvation. Sergeant Holloway gave the order, "Listen up. Out there is a Panzer IV. On these narrow streets, if we show ourselves, we'll be blown to pieces. But we have the bazooka, and we've got these walls to hide behind." He pointed at the thick stone wall. "Knock a hole through it. We'll crawl like rats and fire from inside." Never face a tank head-on. The sound of picks and hammers echoed. The GIs smashed through, carving a hole just wide enough for the bazooka's snout. Carter wiped the sweat off and gave a weary grin. "We're like sewer rats gnawing through walls. War turns men into vermin." Sam slid a rocket in and winked. "Yeah, but these rats can bite steel tigers to death." The squad gave a dry laugh, drowned out by the grind of approaching tracks. A German Panzer IV roared into the main street. Inside the turret, Lieutenant Hans Keller clenched his teeth. Cursed streets, every house could hide an enemy, but orders are to advance. The gunner warned, "Sir, it's too narrow." "We can't traverse the turret fast enough," Hans growled. "No delays." If we stop, we become a target. From the dark hole in the wall, Carter took careful aim. Sam whispered, "Let it come closer. Aim for the flank, where the armor's thin." Whoosh! The rocket blasted out, exploding in a brilliant flash against the Panzer's side. Fire roared up. Screams echoed from inside. A German soldier popped the hatch, leaping out, his body aflame like a torch. Sam shouted, "Got it!" The Panzer's burning. Carter lowered the bazooka, gasping for breath. But from the end of the street, another Panzer crawled forward, machine guns raking the walls. "Back inside! Punch through to the next house," Holloway barked. Once again they smashed through, tunnelling into the neighbouring home, continuing their rat war. Young Private Tommy panted, "Sergeant, this isn't fighting, it's burrowing." Holloway smirked. "Right. But this is a death tunnel. For Panzers house by house, Ortona turned into a fortress. Americans and Canadians worked together, crawling through walls, leaping from rooftops, bazookas always ready. Every time a Panzer rolled into a street, a dark hole spat fire, turning the beast into twisted wreckage. The German Panzer Division's combat log recorded, "The enemy uses rocket launchers from inside houses." We lost 2 vehicles on a single street. Advance is impossible without infantry screening ahead. That night, in a dark wine cellar, Carter and Sam split a hard loaf of bread. Young recruit Tommy sat beside them, his eyes still wide with fear. When that Panzer blew up, I heard the Germans screaming inside. I can't sleep. Sam patted his shoulder. That's war, kid. If we don't shoot, they'll crush you instead. Carter spoke quietly. True. But don't forget, every time we pull the trigger, we burn lives just like ours. The bazooka doesn't just destroy tanks, it incinerates men. No one said another word. The distant rumble of bombs was a cruel reminder. On the German side, the fear spread. Lieutenant Hans Keller reported after the Battle of Ortona, "Tigers and Panzers cannot enter narrow streets. Every house is a trap. The enemy tunnels through walls and fires from inside. We are forced to halt, waiting for infantry to clear the way, metre by metre," a senior commander read it, shaking his head. This is a disgrace. Panzer, the pride of the Reich, brought to a standstill by rats with steel tubes. By early 1944, new orders appeared in Panzer training manuals. Tanks are not to advance into urban areas without infantry first. Every uncontrolled building must be cleared. Do not advance more than 100 metres without support. Carter heard the news from an intelligence officer and chuckled bitterly. We made the Germans change their tactics. All because of a $25 tube, Sam slapped the bazooka stock proudly. See? We're the kings of the streets now. In Washington, reports from Italy shook the Pentagon. A general said at a meeting, the bazooka isn't just an anti-tank weapon, it has become an urban assault tool. Our men can use it to blast walls, open paths, knock out machine gun nests. This is a universal weapon. One cold, rainy day in Ortona, Carter and Sam were ordered to lead a squad through the church district. As they knocked through a wall, suddenly a group of Germans stormed in. Bullets poured down like rain. Tommy shouted, "We're trapped!" Carter aimed the bazooka at the wall ahead. Boom! A gaping hole appeared. He yelled, "Through! Now!" The squad scrambled into the next building, escaping by a hair. Sam laughed loudly, sweat soaking his face. "The bazooka saved our hides again." A British Corps report noted, "Bazooka employed as an engineer's tool. Breaches walls, creates new passages. Highly effective in urban combat. No other weapon is so versatile." That night, in a half-collapsed room, Carter wrote in his little notebook, "Once we feared tanks. Now tanks fear us." The bazooka has changed everything, he stopped writing, staring through a jagged hole in the wall at the smouldering wreck of a Panzer outside. In his mind, the blackened faces inside the tank kept coming back. In Berlin, news of heavy tank losses in Italian towns made Guderian exclaim at a meeting, "Our blitzkrieg tactics are dead. From now on, every brick, every wall is a threat." Another officer said bitterly, "All because of a cheap steel tube." The war in Italy had transformed the bazooka from an anti-tank weapon into the symbol of urban guerrilla art. Americans, Canadians, and the British all embraced it. Soldiers gave it a new name, the key to the street. And to Panzer crews, it had another name, one that haunted them, the sewer rat's roar. Time passed, but in every Italian house, every narrow alley, German soldiers looked around in fear. Was there a bazooka waiting behind that wall? The nightmare had begun, and its name was Bazooka. June 6th, 1944. Normandy skies hung grey, the sea churned violently. On Omaha Beach, thousands of American soldiers hurled themselves into the German wall of fire. MG-42s screamed in long bursts, artillery rained down like a storm, sand flew, stained with red blood. Carter and Sam, now seasoned veterans of North Africa and Italy, pressed their bellies into the sand, seawater soaking their backs. Beside them, in a waterlogged crate, lay two brand-new M9A1 bazookas, the improved model with optical sights. Sam panted. God almighty, Omaha is hell itself. Carter gripped the bazooka tight, eyes burning with tension. Hell or not, we have to break through. If we don't, the Panzers will crush the whole world." That afternoon, they and their squad finally crawled off the beach and pushed deeper into the bocage country, those thick earth hedgerows overgrown with tangled brush. This was Normandy's trademark, each field a natural fortress of its own, Sergeant Halloway explained, pointing at the dense hedge ahead. Each of these hedgerows is nearly 2 meters high, a meter thick with earth and roots. A tank can't see what's on the other side, and that's where our bazookas come into their own engines rumbled. A Panzer IV lumbered into view along the country lane, its turret slowly swinging. Carter and Sam dove into a dirt hole, Bazooka on Carter's shoulder. Sam slid a rocket into the tube and whispered, "Wait till it gets closer. Hit the flank." The front's too thick, Carter held his breath. Whoosh! The rocket streaked out, slamming into the Panzer's side. Flames burst up, the tank shuddered to a halt, and black smoke spewed from its vents. Sam shouted, "Bullseye! It's burning!" From the opposite hedgerow, a group of German infantry broke in panic and fled. Inside the burning tank, a German crewman screamed, "Where are they? I can't see them." The driver moaned, "In the hedgerows! They're everywhere!" Despair spread fast. They realized that no road was safe anymore. The next day, at Panzer Lehr Division headquarters, an officer reported, "The Americans position bazookas inside the hedgerows. We lost 3 tanks in 1 hour. We cannot advance quickly." A commander slammed the table. "Damn it! Every hedge could spit fire straight at us. Is there no way to counter this?" June 12th, near Carentan. A column of Panthers rolled into the village. American troops again hid in collapsed houses, bazookas aimed from second-story windows. Whoosh! A rocket punched into an engine deck and a Panther went up in flames. German troops screamed and broke in retreat. A German officer wrote in his diary, "We no longer dare to drive tanks into villages." Every window may spit death that night, Carter wrote a letter home to his mother. "Dearest mother, today I saw 4 Panzers burn in the space of an hour. The Germans no longer charge like before. They crawl forward, trembling. But we are exhausted too. War has turned us into hunters, but also into devils in our own eyes." On the German side, Guderian received the reports. He read them, his face turning pale. Bazookas are everywhere. The pace of breakthrough is gone. Every hedgerow is an ambush nest. Panzers can no longer move freely, another officer added bitterly. The Americans have found the perfect weapon for Normandy, and it costs only $25. In an American camp, a training officer barked at the new recruits, "Listen up. In Normandy, bazookas destroyed 12% of all German tanks in just 6 weeks. Each of you is a hunter. Remember, don't shoot at the front. Always aim for the side or the rear. And once you fire, don't stay put. Move immediately, or an 88 will wipe out your whole squad." A roar of voices answered, "Yes, sir." In Berlin, reports from Normandy left generals stunned. One whispered, "Tiger, Panther, Panzer IV, all can be killed by a farm boy with a steel tube. This is humiliation beyond anything we've ever known." From then on, Germany understood that every hedge, every village road could erupt in fire, the fire of a $25 tube burning away the pride of machines worth hundreds of thousands of marks. September 1943, Berlin. In the smoke-filled conference room of the Armaments Ministry, Albert Speer slammed the captured American bazooka from North Africa onto the table. Engineers and generals murmured in agitation. Speer spoke firmly. "The Americans have given their infantry a weapon capable of destroying our tanks. We cannot allow the Panzer to be burned by a $25 weapon. Copy it, improve it. I want it stronger, able to penetrate thicker armour." One engineer, Müller, presented a design. "We've increased the warhead diameter from 60 mm to 88 mm. Working name, Raketenpanzerbüchse 43. The troops call it Panzerschreck. A panzer general narrowed his eyes, laughing bitterly. The terror of tanks, is it? And we must use an American copy to defend German pride. Speer answered coldly, reality speaks for itself. Our tanks have burned at Ortona, in Sicily, in Normandy. Without this, the Panzerwaffe will cease to exist. Winter 1943, Eastern Front. German troops were issued the first Panzerfausts. A simple weapon, fired once and then discarded. A corporal named Franz trembled as he held one, asking his comrade, "Are you sure this thing works?" "Looks like a water pipe with an oversized warhead," Sergeant Otto snapped. "Don't ask questions." When the T-34s come, aim for the side and pull the trigger. Either it burns or we die. Moments later, a column of T-34s charged across the snow. Franz crouched behind an earthwork, heart pounding like a drum. He raised the Panzerfaust and squeezed the trigger. Whoosh! Boom! The massive warhead slammed into the tank's side, exploding and blowing the turret sky high. Franz screamed, half in terror, half in exhilaration. It's burning! Otto clapped his shoulder. Good! But remember, you only get one shot. After that, all you've got is a useless Kar-98 against a tank. In France, the first Panzerschrecks also entered combat. Privates Dieter and Karl hid inside a cowshed, aiming at an advancing Sherman. Dieter fired. The 88mm rocket streaked out. Boom! The Sherman burst into flames. Karl shouted, "See? This thing's twice as strong as the American Bazooka." But immediately afterward, both of them coughed violently, their faces scorched. Smoke and flame had backblasted straight into them, lacking a protective shield. Dieter cursed, "Damn it. This thing kills us too. Only after that battle did engineers add a blast shield to protect the operators." While Germany struggled to refine its design, American production lines were running at full capacity. Carter, Sam and their squad received brand new bazookas, turned out in just weeks. Tommy laughed. "Good Lord, the Germans must be going mad knowing we can churn out hundreds of thousands of these in just a few months." Berlin, spring 1944. A tense meeting. Guderian slammed his hand on the table. "Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck are good, I admit, but there are far too few. We've built 200,000, while the Americans already have over 400,000 bazookas. How can we compete?" Another general sighed. "But we have no workers, no raw materials. Our factories are bombed day and night. They have Detroit, they have General Electric, they have millions of women working the lines." Silence followed. Italian Front, summer 1944. Carter and Sam entered a small roadside village. From afar, they spotted a German soldier raising a massive Panzerschreck. "Danger! That's the German copy of the bazooka," Carter shouted. The rocket blasted out, smashing through a nearby wall. But before the Germans could fire again, American artillery rained down, scattering the entire squad. Sam spat in the dirt. "They can copy it, but they'll never outproduce the number of bombs we drop on them." In Berlin, Speer received a report. "By September 1944, we have produced 289,000 Panzerschrecks, but the Americans have already surpassed 500,000 bazookas. They are supplying them to the British, the French, even the Soviets." Speer lowered his head, his voice choked. "We are not losing in technology, we are losing in numbers." On the Normandy battlefield, a Panzer IV weighed down with track links, sandbags, even slabs of concrete bolted to its armour, still went up in flames under a volley of bazooka fire. German tankers shook their heads in despair. Nothing can protect us. They're everywhere. In a shattered Hamburg beer hall, German soldiers spoke in uneasy tones. They call ours Panzer, the terror of tanks. But in truth, we're the ones living in terror, knowing the original weapon across the ocean exists in double, triple the numbers. And so, in desperate effort, Germany unleashed its bazooka copies. They were powerful, even superior in some technical ways, but never numerous enough. Meanwhile, in America, a bazooka took just 2 hours for a factory hand to learn and a simple assembly line to build. That imbalance was the death sentence for the Panzerwaffe. December 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Thick snow blanketed the rolling hills, so quiet it seemed as if war had abandoned the place. But then, on the morning of December 16th, the ground trembled. The roar of Maybach engines shattered the silence. Hundreds of German tanks and armoured vehicles surged out of the fog. This was Hitler's last gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. In a freezing trench near Rocherath, Carter pulled his collar high, his breath turning into white smoke. Sam huddled beside him, clutching his M9A1 bazooka, his face pale and stiff from the cold. "Damn it, Carter," Sam muttered through chattering teeth. "If the tanks don't kill us, the cold will." Carter pulled a rocket from inside his coat, pressing it against his chest for warmth. "You heard the sergeant." Dry cell batteries in the bazooka freeze solid in sub-zero weather. If you want it to fire, you've got to brood over it like a mother hen. Never thought I'd see a weapon that needed tender, loving care. Tommy, the new kid just added to their squad, forced a shaky grin. "At least we've got something to fight with." I heard the Germans are throwing both Tigers and Panthers into this. Without bazookas, we wouldn't stand a chance. At the trench line, Sergeant Halloway raised his binoculars. In the distance, black steel shapes crawled out of the snow haze, treads grinding on ice, 88mm guns swinging ominously. "Listen up," Halloway bellowed. "We've got no anti-tank guns, no Shermans. All we've got are bazookas. Fire at close range, hit the flanks or the rear. And once you shoot, move. If you stay put, you'll be fertilizer for Ardennes trees come spring." A chorus of "Yes, sir" rang out, though every heart trembled. The lead Panther stopped in the middle of the frozen village road. Its gun swung slowly, settling on a stone house by the roadside. Boom! The entire building collapsed in a fireball. In the trench, Tommy panicked. "Carter, it's too close." "We'll never make it." Carter grabbed his shoulder, speaking firmly. "Listen to me. Tiger or Panther, it's just steel. It can be destroyed. You've seen it happen." Sam slid a rocket into the tube, his fingers stiff with cold. "Carter, the battery still good?" Carter checked the leads and sighed in relief. "It's fine." "Been against my chest all morning. Just pray I don't miss." Halloway gave the signal. Carter hoisted the bazooka to his shoulder, holding his breath. Whoosh! The rocket hissed through the air, slamming into the Panther's rear. Boom! Flames shot from the engine deck. The 45-ton monster shuddered to a halt, black smoke billowing out. The GIs in the trench roared in triumph, but their cheers were cut short as a Panzer IV behind it fired. "Move! Now!" Halloway shouted. The squad scrambled into another foxhole just as a shell obliterated their old position. Dirt and snow rained down, now streaked with blood. Inside the burning Panther, chaos reigned. The driver screamed, "Where are they?" "I can't see a damn thing." Lieutenant Karl Hoffmann, the same man who had escaped Sicily, gripped the commander's seat, his gut twisting. Rommel's words from long ago echoed in his head. Every bush can hide death. The battle raged on. Many rockets went wide, some failed to fire, their propellant ruined by the bitter cold. One GI pulled the trigger and got only a puff of smoke, the rocket stuck in the tube. The whole squad bolted from the trench before it exploded. Tommy shook violently, screaming, "Dud round! We're done for!" Sam yanked him down. "Shut up!" Grab another round. Hurry! Carter clenched his teeth, sighted on an approaching Panzer, and fired. The rocket struck its rear engine block. Flames roared high. German crewmen bailed out, fleeing in panic. When the smoke cleared, the snowy field was littered with blackened tank carcasses. In the Panzer Lehr Division's after-action report, it read, December 16th, multiple tanks destroyed by bazookas at close range. Our troops' severely shaken night fell, and in a frozen snow bunker, American soldiers huddled around a kerosene lamp. Carter sighed. It isn't God saving us, it's the workers in Detroit and New York. They've built hundreds of thousands of these steel tubes. Tommy sat quietly, his eyes distant. I still hear the screams from inside the burning tanks. Maybe I'll hear them forever. The bunker fell silent. War didn't just burn tanks, it burned away their youth. December 19th, near Rocherath. Technical Sergeant Donald Bracken lay in ambush with his bazooka team. As a Panther crawled past, he squeezed the trigger. The rocket flew, punched straight into the engine. Flames engulfed the tank. The crew bailed out, hands raised in surrender. In his after-action report, Bracken wrote, Range 75 yards, one shot, Panther in flames. The morale of the unit lifted through those bloody days. Bazookas destroyed or disabled nearly 90 German tanks. In Berlin, the news left many generals speechless. One growled, The Reich's tanks have been turned into moving targets. Any American GI can bring us down, a young officer whispered, trembling. This is the end of the Panzerwaffe. At 6th Army Corps headquarters, General von Manteuffel sat in grim silence. He read the report, his voice heavy. Our lightning war is dead. Blitzkrieg no longer exists, because in every bush, every snow hole, a bazooka is waiting. Christmas Eve, 1944. Carter wrote in his journal, his hand shaking from the cold. December 24th, 1944. The Ardennes is white with snow, but not pure. It is soaked with blood and the smoke of burning tanks. Today I burned a Panther. I saw Germans jump out, hands raised, their eyes filled with terror. I thought of my mother, of the warm house in Ohio, but their screams will haunt me forever. When someone asks me what I remember about Christmas 1944, I'll say the whoosh of a bazooka echoing in the forest and the red glow of fire spreading across the white snow. The Ardennes campaign dragged on into January 1945. The Germans threw in everything, hoping to reverse their hopeless situation, but the bazooka turned every village, every mountain road into a death trap for them. An American officer later said, The Ardennes wasn't just the victory of artillery or air power. It was the victory of frozen kids clutching bazookas in the snow, stopping whole panzer divisions. And so Hitler's last punch shattered. In the white snows of the Ardennes, the bazooka proved its worth to the very end, reducing Germany's pride to smouldering wreckage. May 1945. Ruined Berlin. Smoke still rose from charred buildings, rubble scattered everywhere. On the square, the Red Army's flag fluttered in the wind, while from the west, American convoys rolled in, soldiers carrying bazookas on their shoulders as a now familiar symbol. In an abandoned bunker near the Tiergarten, General Heinz Guderian sat silently at a scorched wooden table, his eyes bloodshot. On the table lay a captured M9A1 bazooka from Normandy, its metal still scratched. Guderian lifted it and sighed. How absurd, he muttered. The Panzerwaffe, the pride of the Reich, beaten by a steel tube cheaper than a bicycle. A young officer sitting across from him bowed his head. Sir, it wasn't that the Panzers weren't strong. We had Tigers, Panthers, the best weapons in the world. But the Americans, they had too many. Guderian tapped his fingers on the bazooka, each strike hollow and sharp. Not too many. Endless. They built nearly 500,000 of these. We managed only a few 100,000 Panzerschrecks, and always short of ammunition, short of men. This was industrial war, and we lost it before it even began. Washington, summer 1945. In a Pentagon conference room, senior officers presented their final report. "Gentlemen," one general said, "we produced more than 476,000 bazookas and 15 million rockets in total. Average cost, $25 per launcher, $8 per round." He looked up, his eyes gleaming. "Gentlemen, one bazooka and 10 rockets, about $110, was enough to destroy a $100,000 monster. That was the death sentence for the Panzer." Another officer added, "And not just on the battlefield." The bazooka changed the spirit of our frontline soldiers. Before 1942, infantry ran when they heard tank treads. After 1943, they stood their ground, raised the bazooka, and turned from victims into hunters. The room erupted in applause. Back in Berlin, during post-war interrogations, German officers were pressed about the bazooka. Field Marshal Kesselring sighed. "That weapon forced us to change our entire doctrine." Blitzkrieg was dead. We had to crawl forward, wait for infantry to clear the way. Tanks could no longer operate alone. Another general, his eyes sunken, spoke bitterly. "We once believed quality would defeat quantity. But we were wrong. The Americans had quality and enough quantity to arm every soldier. Every bush, every window could hide a bazooka. That was the real nightmare." In a temporary camp in southern Germany, Carter, who had survived to the very end, sat beside Sam. Sam chuckled dryly. "Remember that first day in Algeria? We opened the crate and didn't even know how to put the damn thing together, missed half our shots." Carter nodded, his eyes distant. "Now it's different. The bazooka's been with us from North Africa, Italy, Normandy, the Ardennes. Every step of the way, it kept us alive." Both men fell silent, sharing a quiet smile. Above them, the sunset glowed red like blood. At a military symposium in 1946, an American officer summed it up. "We talk about the atomic bomb, the B-17, the Sherman. But let's not forget, the bazooka was what changed the psychology of war. It gave a private the power to bring down a steel giant. It erased the gap between the common soldier and the Panzer years later in the Munster Tank Museum in Germany. A plaque beside an American bazooka read, "Bazooka, the weapon that sparked a revolution. Cheap, simple, effective." It stood as proof of America's industrial might and marked the downfall of the Panzerwaffe. An old Panzer veteran, his hair snow-white, stood before the plaque and muttered, "Back then, we laughed. Laughed that Americans were only good at making refrigerators and razors. But then a cheap steel tube burned away our pride." Tears slipped down his cheeks, mingling with bitter memories. Carter, in his final letter home to Ohio, wrote, "Dearest Mother, I will return after the war, carrying more scars than I care to admit. I still remember the smell of smoke from burning tanks, the whoosh echoing in the Ardennes woods, and the red glow over Sicily. The bazooka saved my life. I don't know how history will record it, but for me, the bazooka was more than a weapon. It was proof that ordinary workers welding steel tubes in factories could change the fate of the world. I survived because of those people, and I will carry that memory for the rest of my life." And so the story closed. The bazooka, born as nothing more than a steel tube with a coat-hanger sight, ended as hundreds of thousands of launchers spread across the globe. It reshaped tactics, it reshaped psychology, and above all, it proved the extraordinary industrial power of the strongest nation on Earth.